Oh, he got it. He came back and got it. That was one of the most violent flipping bites I've ever had. And then so we're flipping amongst these pad fields here. There's a lot of different type of vegetation. You get hyacinths and pennyworts, all kinds of stuff that get hung up in the pads. And it's just a high percentage area amongst the pads that these fish will sit to eat, find cover, anything. It's just thicker area of the pads. So it's always, when you get to a pad field, you look at the pad field, oh, it's a huge pad field, but there's always little isolated areas amongst the pads of just thicker types of vegetation. So big weight, big arc tungsten, 1.25 ounce, Zoom Z-Crawl Junior, black and blue, typical flipping color, just fishing these mats. So around the country fishing, you know, everybody says wind is your friend. Like you get there throwing a crankbait, spinnerbait, or whatever, wind makes them bite. In my experience in Florida fishing, wind's never really a good thing. I mean, a lot of times you can't avoid it because these lakes are so flat and there's just no cover to block it. But generally, when you get wind in Florida, it's just not an ideal scenario. It dirties up the water very quickly because it shakes the vegetation and it pushes dirty water from areas into areas that may have been clear. So when got one right there. So wind, you want to try to avoid the wind when you're in Florida. Another good flipping fish. This little reed pile here blocked the current and wind coming through, and the fish was right in this pennywort mat hung up in the backside here. You can see the wind coming across here. It's just kind of a little protected area amongst all this massive jungle of vegetation. Just look for little isolated features within what looks like everything. Like if you haven't fished Florida a ton, like you ride by, like, oh, a huge pad field. But when you, every time, almost every lake in Florida, you get up in the pads, there's little, this is a little over because there's mats everywhere. But even St. John's, I mean, everywhere I've ever been, there's just isolated mats hung up in the pads that you really can't see until you start fishing. It's kind of a cool thing that I really never realized till I really put down the trolling motor and started fishing a lot of places in Florida. There's a lot of subtle features that you don't see until you're fishing, not running. In Florida, like the quality of the vegetation, I feel like makes a huge difference. Yellow, when it starts looking like that, I mean, a lot of times a year, if it gets really cold, some of it will die naturally. And then like dead vegetation can be very good when it's really cold. Like when you're talking, I know before at Okeechobee, for instance, I've done real well before in a super cold front flipping dead hyacinth mats because they're just warmer. But generally healthy vegetation is always better, whether it be hydrilla, pads, hyacinths, pennyworts, whatever it is healthier, greener is better. This is stuff starting to die. I don't know if it was sprayed, it's just water quality. There's no way to find out exactly what's killing it. It's just not in great health. So when you're flipping, I mean, obviously your setup can vary greatly, but one way to look at it, a lot of times you get real thick stuff here, like this is super thick. Like you could need up to a 2 ounce weight to get through this, but one other way to do it, rather than going up in weight, you can always go down in bait size. That's like I've got this 1.25 ounce, 1.5 ounce weight on here. With a full size Z-Crawl, I'd have trouble getting through, but I go down to a junior and it slips right through. So a lot of times I feel like rather than going up in bait, you're better off, or going up in weight, you're better off in going down in bait size or down in profile. You could put like a tighter, like a speed crawl or something that's more aerodynamic to get through with a smaller weight rather than having to go up to a 2 ounce to get a big brush hog or a Z-Crawl through. When you're talking heavy cover, you know, big weight punching, Florida style fishing, you gotta have the right setup, because not only is it wear you out all day if you don't, you gotta get the fish out of this stuff. I mean, just a 2-pounder in the thickest of vegetation can be hard to get out. So setup wise, you gotta go big. I mean, that's what I do. I use 65 or 50 pound braided line, Yozuri Super Braid. I actually prefer 50 personally, because I feel like the 50 is a little more manageable. It comes through the guides better, easier to tie knots. I use 50 most of the time. A big rod, I mean, 710, 711 heavy, and gear ratio reel. I like a 7.3. Some people use 8.0s or faster. I like a 7.3 Revo STX. It's just a beefier reel. The little bit lower gear ratio lets you get them out a little bit easier rather than the 8 or 9 or 10.0. So I like a big setup. I mean, you're trying to get fish out of the thickest cover in the lake. Florida fishing, I mean, flipping, dragging a weightless worm, whatever you're doing in Florida, generally you want to find the best quality water. By that I mean the clearest water. In Florida fishing, if you get a lot of wind and stuff, areas will just get dirty. I mean, the grass shakes, it gets nasty, and Florida fish don't like dirty water. Growing up at home, you get dirty water, oh man, they're gonna bite, they can't see my bait as good. Well, that's not really the case in Florida. You wanna keep moving around until you find the most ideal water clarity and quality. He was in there. That's why you need heavy equipment when you're flipping. That's not even a giant fish, but couldn't hardly get him out. Ate it too. Good chunky black, been living up under there his whole life.